Tuby sees several changes in this patch regarding her skill gauge and how it interacts with various parts of her kit, so we're going to go ahead and focus on that to start off the video. In the previous patch, what they tried to do to nerf Tuby was to make it so that her skills were a little more expensive and she regenerated her skill gauge slower. While this was effective, she still performed at very strong levels in competitive play, while also was a little more stiff to play. It kind of felt like while she was a character that had so many special tools to use with her moves, she wasn't able to access them all the time and therefore tunneled on using the same most effective ones over and over again. In this patch, they're giving back more of her skill gauge regeneration while also making more things cost skill. As an example, while she's taking damage, her recovery of skill gauge has been increased from 25% to 50%.
Great.
As you can see, while you're taking a combo, you basically didn't build any skill gauge before. This is the regeneration now.
Great.
As you can tell, it's still reduced, but it's slightly faster. Additionally, while she was using skills, she was not able to regenerate any of her skill gauge, even if the opponent wasn't getting hit. Now she's able to recover skill gauge while she uses her skills, albeit when the opponent is not getting hit by them. In this situation previously, Tuby would be stuck at the 4 bars of skill gauge left. Now she was able to regenerate an entire bar of skill gauge during this interaction. This should give you a microcosm idea of how much more skill gauge Tuby is going to be able to generate. And I think it's a pretty smart rework. She still has the penalty against the opponent while she's hitting them. So while she is able to get her offense going with these skills, when she's successful, she's not able to regenerate her skill gauge to loop this one. But while she's trying to create that opportunity against the opponent, throwing out their skills from full range in various other locations, she is able to regenerate that skill gauge so that she has more opportunities to be on the offensive. Overall, I like this. As a guest character, Tuby has several unique mechanics to her to make her stand out from the rest of the cast. What's namely defined her outside of the skill gauge mechanic has been her movement with grab pod, as well as her double jump. She has more mobility than the entire cast put together, and this was at no cost to her before. But there are several changes to the function of these moves and how they interact with her, and they're all tied to the skill gauge now. Starting with grab pod, grabbing onto pod now consumes 1 skill gauge on activation. Additionally, you are able to hold on to pod for longer, but for every second that you hold on, you consume 1 bar of skill gauge. However, once she lets go of pod, she's no longer in a counter-hittable state. This was the behavior before. So when she lets go of pod, she's at less risk for taking a huge damage combo from the opponent. In return, while she is able to now vary how long she holds on to pod, it is at the cost of her valuable skill gauge. Before, Tuby would automatically let go of pod after grabbing on. This fairly limited the range of movement that you had with it, but that wasn't too important. Now she'll hold on to pod until she runs out of skill gauge or reaches the ground. It does mean that she is able to be far more floaty than before, granted though at a cost. We'll see if this has any sort of matchup implications, though I can see it being used as a way to help slow down the game if she has a life lead. Additionally, she can now use the follow-up of grab pod as many times as she wants in the air. You'll note that during its active frame, she's still losing skill gauge at the same rate as she was before. Before, she could only get 2 of these follow-ups out. The last change regarding her movement with skill gauge is her double jump. Before, this was a free action that she had in the air. Now, it costs a single skill gauge to use. While all of these are functionally nerfs that are probably not going to vibe so well with Tuby mains, I think it's very cool how pretty much all of Tuby's unique movement options are now tied together under the skill gauge. If she wants to break the rules of Grand Blue, it costs her a bar of her own skill gauge to do so. I think that's just kind of interesting from a design perspective, how this guest character is behaving by her own rules and has consequences to those rules within her own systems now. It's a pretty cool change overall, I think, and something that is going to also make it a lot more difficult for Tuby players to just make these decisions. Before, it was pretty much a free decision. on double jumping. You know, do I double jump to delay my fall timing based on anti-air or not? But now this could actually have matchup implications of I can't double jump here because I need this one skill gauge to use the skill I want to use to get the optimal combo. There's a little more nuance underneath, which does make Tuby a little harder to play in some of these situations, but I think it also makes her more interesting to play and to fight against as well. We'll see where everything falls here, but don't get me wrong, all of these changes are nerfs, and we still got a couple of other nerfs to go through as well. I think a lot of people describe standing medium on Tuby as a war crime normal. It's fast with 9-frame startup, had great speed, and covered a lot of ground. Furthermore, it led to full combo on hit and full pressure on block stream because she was able to cancel it.
Great.
Additionally, she could do it on whiff. All of this was very much on purpose, though. She doesn't have access to dash attacks. This means she doesn't have a dash light attack to force her turn on offense over and over again like the rest of the cast does. Arxis and Side Game's vision was to let 5M basically be a substitute for dash light. However, being a medium starter, it was going to be a little too much in this patch after they nerfed the damage scaling on dash lights overall. Plus, she's been able to hold her ground with this normal for quite some time. So, it sees a couple of nerfs in this patch. Its travel speed and distance covered has been reduced. We almost hit Gran here before. Now I can't even hit him with 2 of these. It's going to take me 3 overall. This is a pretty big nerf for her that changes a lot of her pressure sequences as well as neutral. To make up for this, now if you cancel out of her forward evasive maneuver with a normal, she maintains some of the momentum in the later part of the attack. Compare that to before. As you can see, she pretty much stops as soon as she throws out the light before, whereas in the current version, she slides forward a little bit. This effectively makes up for the range loss on standing medium. In order to get that range now, she has to go into evasive maneuver and dash. In a way, this almost makes her behave like she has dash attacks with this new momentum for herself. Both versions of her evasive maneuver, however, do see some nerfs to them. The forward version has 4 more frames of her being counter-hittable, and I assume this at the startup of the move, meaning that there's a little more risk to throwing this one out, at potential of getting caught out by the opponent and giving them opportunity to get a better conversion. The back version has a significant nerf with its interaction with 6XL. Before, if you're able to anticipate that a 6XL from the enemy was coming, you could use the back version of evasive maneuver to dodge it and then be able to be in a +9 situation, which was perfect frame data to punish with a far M.
Great.
Now, she's only +4 in this situation. So she's not even able to get a punish against a character for going for dash lights. It's another big nerf to her overall. Before, a good player would be able to anticipate a 6XL and then be able to say, no, I'm not going to take your pressure. Instead, I'm going to get a medium starter on you to punish you for this. Now, she's at the very least able to deny the opponent their turn and get her own offense going. So this completely normalizes the risk-reward for the opponent to go for 6XLs against her again. Tuby's kind of playing by the same rules as everybody else right now, it seems. Now let's get into Tuby's specific move changes in this patch. Her Severing Assault's 4th hit had its damage reduced by 200. Instead of doing 1200, and now does 1000. Scaled in this combo, it does 600. Before, this was the damage. 720, so effectively a loss of 120 damage. Tuby's multi-strike protocol, which is when she presses heavy during her striking assault or light during her severing assault, has some damage reworks going on. Before, the strike used to do 1200 damage, and the projectile did 700. Now, the strike part does 1000 damage, so a loss of 200 damage, but the projectile does 1000 damage, so an increase of 300 there. Before, if you wanted to get a wall bounce with this protocol in the corner, you had to hit with the projectile.
Great.
You couldn't combo into this on grounded hits, so you namely could only do this on air combos with particular routing. However, now, the sword part of the attack will cause a wall bounce. However, I seem to be having issues making this actually able to combo. You're not able to link any normals on the ground with it, so I have to imagine that you have to first launch the opponent to get a little more height, and then use this to get an extra link off of it. So I'm not quite sure what utility this entails, but it's certainly out there. Pod A has a small buff. On grounded foes before, if you got a hit, they were left on the ground and basically you were in a +0 situation. Now on hit, the opponent is launched. This means if Tuby wants to safely end her pressure with this move, she's actually able to get some offense going for herself here. I don't think I mentioned this before, so while we're on the subject of Pod A, now's a good time to mention that while she uses this move, she doesn't regenerate any skill gauge. Considering this is a safe on block move, if she was just able to stall out her pressure to buy time to regenerate skill gauge, that might be a little too much for her, I suppose, in terms of regeneration. Pod B has a small buff. On counter hit, there's 8 more frames of hit stop, so now 2B has a 16 frame window to get a combo on the opponent. Compare that to the current version.
Great.
This is pretty nice overall. Tuby doesn't mind frame trapping with this tool, and being able to threaten more damage from it is always a bonus. At full screen, this new utility means she's actually able to link an ultimate pod.
Great.
This can be nice for tagging on extra damage for a kill at full screen. Pod C sees a similar buff to its hit stop on counter hit. It went up from 11 frames to 24 frames. Basically, you're able to easily catch with a standing heavy.
Great.
Considering that's a 14 frame startup attack, you got another 10 frames to work with to find other links that you can make here as well. Compare that to before. A090 Wire has seen some buffs. The whiff recovery has been reduced. Before, if you whiff this move, you had 66 frames of recovery. Now, there's only 57 frames of recovery. This makes it a lot safer to throw out overall. You might have also noticed that the wire travel speed was increased as well. At full screen in the current patch, it hits at frame 33, which is pretty quick. Previously, it could hit at frame 36, so it's only a difference of a couple of frames, but still, it's something that 2B will appreciate. The mid-air hit stun was also increased. Before, you had about 18 frames to work with.
Great.
Which is pretty reasonable for her to get any sort of combo link here. Now she has 27 frames of hit stun to work with. One last change to wire I'm not going to be able to show at the moment is that the rear hitbox of the projectile has been expanded backwards. Some opponents would be able to use a fast movement skill to basically move through the wire's hitbox before it ever make contact with their hurtbox, and thus were able to unintentionally make the move whiff. So now it should be able to catch some of these skills that were able to go through it before by sheer velocity. Hammer has seen some adjustments, most notably nerfs, I would argue. Before, the entire front part of the hammer was considered the clean hitbox. So at max ranges, you're going to be able to get this launch. Additionally, if you were too close to the opponent for the clean hitbox, but you were using this in a block string, you could push them back to effectively be at a safe range. Now, only the body of the hammer head itself is considered part of the clean hitbox. So these max range tipper hits aren't actually going to bounce anymore. This is a pretty big nerf to Tuby, I would say, but not one that she's going to be unable to overcome. The patch notes also say that the pushback for everything but a clean hit has been reduced. On block, I don't see a functional difference, really. The launch height on wave has been slightly increased. Before, Tuby wasn't able to get a pickup off of this, which felt bad. She likes to use this move in block strings to steal plus frames back, but there was really not much reward on hit. Now she's able to get a combo.
Great.
This is actually a pretty big buff for 2B. Now you have a plus on block option that also leads to conversion on hit as well. I can see her using this as a throw shimmy tool or as a bait against brave counters. A150 Volt has been buffed. Before, it didn't really serve a purpose in 2B's kit. You could plant it from full screen and detonate it, but the reward on hit wasn't anything spectacular. So it didn't really have a purpose at full screen. Up close, you could set this on the opponent and then manually detonate it to be +6 on block, but 2B had access to many other plus on block options that didn't require this much setup in order to get. Furthermore, this didn't operate on a timer or anything like that, so it wasn't like the opponent was under duress from this move and having to worry about it. If 2B didn't do the follow-up, then nothing happened. Lastly, the opponent was encouraged to go aggressive on 2B. If she got hit, they disappeared. Additionally, if she blocked, they also disappeared. This really didn't have any sort of function within her kit previously. So let's get into the buffs. For starters, If Tuby blocks an attack, they don't disappear. The main buff comes to the follow-up. It now triggers on a successful throw. Before, they really didn't do anything in this situation. If she ran up and through before, the opponent was put in a knockdown with the Volt still active on them. This is honestly a really cool buff for 2B. Now this move serves a function within her kit to put the opponent into a unique strike-throw situation where all of a sudden the throw has more reward than usual, and so they're more inclined to try and tech it. If they do tech it, the Volt does disappear, so they're rewarded for guessing correctly on the throw. However, if they guess with a strike and Tuby gets hit, they're also rewarded by getting rid of those. If Tuby's able to block the strike, she has another opportunity to try and force this mix-up on the enemy. It's kind of going to be really cool to see the mind games that come out of this move going forward. All of Tuby's ultimate skills now cost only 3 skill gauge instead of 4. It's a nice little buff for her. The ultimate skill bomb has an additional change to it. After the first bomb's hitbox activates, if 2B is hit, it no longer is cancelled. Basically, the opponent was able to get a last-second mash or trade or some other active projectile hit here. 2B lost the entire ultimate skill. Now, if this move becomes active and is on the field, she's able to reap the benefits from it and at least have it be consistent presence. Sorry, I'm not able to demonstrate that here. It's a little convoluted to set up. But I know why all of you are here. Let's be honest, there's only one change in this 2B patch that we care about truthfully. No longer are we a meme. No longer are we shackled to the point of useless super moves. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time. Goons out. Now let's get back to being serious about it. SelfDestruct has a couple of changes going on with it. For starters, there's now a simple input execution for it. So instead of having to do a 720 in ultimate, you can now do the light, medium, heavy, and ultimate attack button. That's a nice little bit of just simplicity for the move to have, as 720 inputs are some of the hardest inputs to do in all of fighting games, so a lot of people will appreciate this. As I demonstrated, you can now combo into SelfDestruct. You can only do this off of the third hit of Striking Assault, Slashing Assault, and Severing Assault. So basically, the target combos, if you will, of her light, medium, and heavy chains. Do note, however, though, that this skill will whiff if 2B is too far from the opponent. Just an example of how you can make it whiff. Now let's actually break this down in terms of practical applications for 2B. Just off of the assault combos alone, you're looking at around the mid-5,000s in terms of damage, which isn't that high. Certainly if the opponent has low enough HP and you get this last hit, and you had the resources, you could just go into SelfDestruct to get the funny kill and then play with, this costume of 2B. Keep in mind, too, that if you're trying to optimize these combos, you're going to have to launch the opponent, which means you have to contend with combo limit. Because you need to have 4 hits left of combo limit to combo into this, 1 for each of the assault attacks you need to do, and then a 4th for the super itself, it doesn't really mean you have a whole lot of wiggle room to actually set this up off of a launch.
Marvelous.
So with a simple combo like that, we're looking at 7,530 damage. Let's compare that damage to going for a more optimized combo route that leads into Skybound Art.
Marvelous.
7,150 damage in this case. So actually, the SelfDestruct combo does more damage than the Skybound Art. Of course, the Super Skybound Art is going to do more. So a 500 damage increase when we use the Super Skybound art. Still, when we compare these damages, the Self-Destruct combo sequence actually has some surprising viability. Honestly, I like a lot of the changes to 2B. While some of her more frustrating elements have been toned down in the form of nerfs this patch, she's received a lot in compensation for those changes, especially when it comes to underutilized parts of her toolkit. The Volt changes are some of my favorite I think I've ever gotten the chance to explore as I've gone through the entire cast. And I also think that it's pretty genius how they've been able to incorporate her skill gauge as a means to nerf some of the utility that she got from her unique movement options, while also letting them be able to do more in the first place with those to try and help her stand out more throughout the cast. I think that overall we're going to see 2B players not focus on using the same moves over and over again, but rather trying to experiment more with some of her other kits and diversify their play as we go forward, and I think that's pretty exciting. The one thing that I know for sure, though, is that everybody get ready to see this girl blow up. Release the goons.